it's quite an honour to be here again, back at Breaking Convention. I was here 4 years ago, and this place rocks substantially. And I'm really privileged to kick off today's proceedings. Looking at, as Dave mentioned, my interest is the cultural or popular cultural impact of the so-called DMT gland, or the spirit gland mythos that's been perpetuated since in popular culture, in film, literature, and music since the research that was published by Rick Strassman in 2000, based on his 1990s research at the University of New Mexico, and I'll get straight into that. So my main interest is, while the burden of proof remains to be seen, well, the burden of proof actually remains in relation to the pineal gland producing DMT in psychoactive properties or quantities. Nevertheless, this idea that the pineal gland does produce a DMT in psychoactive properties has essentially left the clinic for a career in popular culture, in film, literature. The spirit gland mythos has enlivened polar perspectives on the human condition. So that's my basic idea is that I want to pursue today, is that from the cosmic re-evolutionism of modern theosophy to the gothic hopelessness of H.P. Lovecraft, we'll see this mythos animated. And I was going to start with, unfortunately, we don't have audio here. I was going to start with this little segment from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, which features a classic line in reference to the extract of pineal, of course from Hunter S. Thompson's novel from, I think it was 1971, I believe, or maybe 1973. Classic line there where Raoul Duke's Samoan attorney explains that your head would swell up like a watermelon. You'd probably gain about 100 pounds in 2 hours. Claws, bleeding warts. Then you'd notice about 6 huge hairy tits swelling up on your back. He shook his head emphatically. Man, I'll try just about anything, but I'll never in hell touch a pineal gland. So, well, Dr Gonzo respectfully avoided extract of pineal. The same could not be said for Dr Strassman, who has celebrated the pineal status as a possible brain site for the production of DMT. So, remote from the imagination of Hunter S. Thompson, for Strassman, the blinding light of pineal DMT enables transit from this life force to the next. Such was the contention in Strassman's DMT, the spirit molecule, relating his groundbreaking 1990s research at the University of New Mexico. He administered over 400 IV doses of DMT to 60 volunteers in what was effectively the first sanctioned clinical application of psychedelics in the US for a generation. Observing the phenomenological effects reported by participants, Strassman documented the alien worlds into which they plunged and the entities encountered. Known to Descartes as the seat of the soul, the function of the pineal gland has been debated throughout history, although its role as a site of melatonin production is well known to modern science. Speculative science on the DMT gland, the so-called DMT gland, has inspired authors of fiction, screenwriters, and musicians who've appropriated the pineal DMT meme to advance narratives vested in diverse metaphysical perspectives. In their imaginative interpretations of the DMT gland mythos, cultural producers have furthered, at one extreme, the spiritual re-evolution of humanity implicit to the theosophists, and those subsequently seeking techniques to access higher consciousness, and at the other, the Gothic horror propagated by Lovecraft. These idealistic, nihilistic polarities find animation in encounters with entities, possessing starkly divergent intentions. As apparent in popular cultural currents, these disparate schools of thought have fueled prevailing cultural ambivalence towards DMT. Now, some of these ideas that I'm presenting today come out of a chapter that I wrote that was part of my book published in 2015, which essentially deals with the impact or the introduction of DMT into the cultural bloodstream since the 50s, since its psychopharmacological actions were discovered. Now, Terence McKenna was among the most vociferous cheerleaders for tryptamines. Extemporizing on the meaning and purpose of endogenous DMT was a popular subject in many public appearances. The breakthrough experience associated with heroic doses, he claimed, could potentiate the redemption of the human spirit. As it turned out, Strassman's long, strange journey with what he dubbed the psychedelic pineal gland began with a pivotal encounter with McKenna and Rupert Sheldrake in 1984 at the Esalen Institute at Big Sur, California. Strassman was also guided by his relationship with Tibetan Buddhism. He proposed that the pineal excretes DMT during extremely stressful life episodes, notably in the event of birth and death. The organ's central position in the brain could, he thought, allow DMT synthesized in the pineal to be secreted directly into the cerebrospinal fluid and impact visual and auditory pathways. When we die or indeed have near-death experiences, it was supposed that the life force leaves the body through the pineal, and at that juncture, DMT release was speculated to be like the floodwaters carrying the soul into the liminal phase, or bardo, between life and death, as depicted in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Functioning like a spirit antenna, and I quote, "Pineal DMT release at 49 days after conception marks the entrance of the spirit into the fetus." Speculation on the psychedelic efficacy of the pineal has reawakened interest in a brain organ, and the function of which has long fired the imagination. Extolling its spiritual propensities, esotericists have championed the capacity of the pineal to arouse previously dormant powers of perception, especially those associated with vision, clairvoyance, seeing auras, and being awakened to information beyond from other dimensions. Appealing to spiritual practitioners, scientists of paranormal, and filmmakers alike, the readouts from Strassman's study impressed those eager for neurochemical explanations of extrasensory abilities and extraordinary states of consciousness. This appeal is unsurprising, given how ideas presented in DMT, the spirit molecule, are broadly commensurate with Western esoteric agendas. Commentaries of participants in Strassman's study take cues from the Theosophical Society. The condensation of meta-reported episodes among his volunteers finds favourable comparisons with interests of modern theosophists. Transit into higher dimensional hyperspace resembles theosophical methods for tripping on the astral plane, where travellers become witness to the astral body, access higher consciousness, and awaken their inner divinity. Contact with reported entities, transmitting visual information, parallels the channeling of wisdom from the hidden masters, recorded by Theosophical Society founder Helena Blavatsky. And finally, reports of some returnees hold resemblance to the intelligent cosmic evolution as described in Blavatsky's Magnus Opum, The Secret Doctrine. Given Blavatsky's belief that a reawakened pineal gland, or what she called the eye of Shiva, that had atrophied through the course of devolution, is integral to this evolution, these are no small signs. The appropriation of Hindu philosophy has given esotericists cause to celebrate the means by which, like an opened third eye, a reawakened pineal enables lucid dreaming, out-of-body experiences, hypnagogic imagery, near-death experiences, astral travel, and ultimately consciousness evolution. Armed with knowledge of the spirit molecule, champions of the evolutionary effects of reactivating the so-called diva eye could fashion practices or update techniques now presumed to enable DMT synthesis in and release from pineal. Others had altogether different designs on the pineal, essentially mocking the spiritual evolutionary agendas of Blavatsky and other theosophists. Lovecraft challenged the presumed virtues of the organ, which in his fiction is exploited as a literary device whose manipulation could reopen cracks in the world. In the horror culture Lovecraft inspired, the pineal gland was no longer the diva eye whose reawakening will allow us to re-evolve, but an ancient gateway whose modern-day disturbance in the hands of corrupt scientists allow them in. In this subversion, the pineal became an antenna that not only detects signals from the cosmic horror show beyond, but as evident in his 1920 short story From Beyond, invites malevolence into our world. Here, not the gateway to higher consciousness or a vehicle for cosmic re-evolution, the reactivated pineal gland exposes humans to the dimension favoured by the great old ones of the narrative Cthulhu mythos. The narrator in the story From Beyond recounts a gripping tale of the estranged scientist Crawford Tillinghast, who has discovered the true function of the pineal gland. The story has at its centre an essentially malevolent gland, the dormant status of which is reawakened by an electrical machine, making transparent properties of a dimension overlapping with our own. And that was the inspiration for a 1984 film adaptation. So these narratives have channeled the spirit molecule into the popular imagination. In one tradition, theosophical pursuits are combined with post-romanticism to forge an understanding that entheogens are, like ancient astronauts, guides for alienated humans now heroically dosed to avert their tragic fate. Among those who've transposed this predilection into fiction is Graham Hancock, for whom DMT, among other substances, is embraced as a world-saving device. Hancock's Entangled, the Eater of Souls is epic dark fantasy in which DMT, ayahuasca, psychoactive mushrooms, ketamine, and other allies are integral to a narrative alive with wormholes, out-of-body states, and the telepathic powers of Neanderthals. Intriguingly, Entangled portrays a fictional project conducted by maverick DMT researcher Dr. John Bannerman, who is on the hunt for the proof of the existence of parallel universes. An obvious treatment on Strassman's project, Bannerman's team introduces DMT to volunteers in a clinical study designed to test for, and I quote, an alternate system of human perception, a sort of sixth sense. This style of fiction will be familiar to fans of fantasy and science fiction, where magic and science is construed to achieve liberating objectives. Only now entheogens, like DMT, are integral to the emancipation. As opposed to opening lines of communication with benevolent intermediaries and saving the world, an alternative narrative enjoys its day in contemporary horror cinema, buoyed by the mythos of the spirit molecule. In this development, an activated pineal is the cause of chaos and confusion and invokes sinister entities. Blair Erickson's 2013 found footage style film Banshee Chapter is exemplary, inspired by Lovecraft's From Beyond and its film adaptation. The film weaves together the shadowy legacy of the CIA's MK Ultra program, in which DMT, alongside other psychoactives, were actually tested on human subjects, and the now popular, weaving that together with the now popular suspicion of DMT's production in the pineal gland. I don't really have time to go into that so much, so I'll go on to the next one, which is the Lazarus Effect, a more recent film, with the agents that it unleashes harboring appallingly unreadable motives and as a device that conveniently dissolves the boundary separating life and death, as David Gelb's 2015 feature, The Lazarus Effect, illustrates, DMT and its ostensible brain site factory continues to appeal to the horror imaginary. In The Lazarus Effect, DMT is the base compound for a serum that, of course, brings back the dead, and as we find out, we might have been better off if the dead weren't tampered with. So, as reported in a 2013 article, it's moving right along now and moving towards a conclusion. 2013 article in the journal Biomedical Chromatography, DMT synthetic enzymes were found in the pineal of rats, while that research in which Stephen Barker, Jimo Borgin, who's here and who we have the honor of presenting after me, and Rick Strassman were involved, appeared to demonstrate that rodent and rat and human brains are capable of producing DMT. But yet the burden of proof hangs over the idea that humans are capable of producing DMT in psychoactive quantities. And yet, despite the scientific lucana, a runaway DMT gland mythos serves disparate agendas broadly consistent with opposing perspectives on the human condition. In staking their claims, cultural producers have exploited the uncertainties associated with DMT, the profoundly unpredictable out-of-body effects of which have rendered the compound ripe for imaginative storytelling. And the story that emerges from these now interwoven narratives is a drug imbued with a powerful ambivalence. It is the circumstances consistent with conflicting attitudes towards human nature articulated through cosmologies that have wrestled over the meaning of the spirit gland, whose function as a conduit between spirit and matter is vested with marked discrepancies. This is actually a slide from the film adaptation of From Beyond. So I'll conclude with a discussion of recent incidents of this antagonism as found in popular sci-fi TV series Sense8, created by the Wachowskis and Michael Straczynski. DMT plays a prominent role from the outset, introduced as a potential source of truth, connection, and transcendence. The molecule's possible role in the special connection between the story's cluster of Homo sensorium and evolved humans distributed across the planet but psychically and sensuously connected is flagged. Well, there's no mention of the pineal gland, so perhaps I'm being a bit cute by using this example. Sense8 does deploy DMT as a device to, as Straczynski explained in an interview, show how the sensates began to come in touch with each other. One of the characters, Riley Blue, an Icelandic DJ, is introduced to Nix, a drug dealer who believes Riley's awakened experience in the opening sequences can be explained by DMT. With echoes of Strassman, McKenna, and ayahuasca, Nix states that DMT is, and I quote, a simple molecule present in all living things. Scientists talk about being part of an eco-biological synaptic network. When people take it, they see their birth, their death, worlds beyond this one. They talk of truth, connection, transcendence. In Sense8, DMT provides the key to understanding the dreamlike extrasensory powers of an evolved species of human, evoking the super beings of the third eye wide open prophesied by Blavatsky. And the role of an endogenous antigen in extrasensory perception remains ever present. Yet a dark twist red flags DMT from the outset. In the opening episode of the series, the smoking of DMT is associated with greed, hate, and violence. And I wish I could show you some of those sequences, with the creators of Sense8 expressing a seriously ambivalent, if not outright contradictory attitude towards the spirit molecule. Expressed as hope and fear, this is quite consistent with the attitudinal polarity with this compound performed throughout its modern history. It is also consistent with agendas, the agendas its endogenous status has served, specifically in esoteric traditions that contest the spiritual function of the pineal gland. So DMT, the spirit molecule, popularized through Nate through the native mechanism of spiritual experience by way of a compelling mythos that escaped the clinic to animate esoteric practice and cult fiction. Given the enigmatic character of the spirit molecule and its ostensible glandular factory, it has proven quite versatile, rendering plausible worldviews competing for a share in its attention economy. And so I guess my final question here is, my new research finding elevated DMT levels in dying rat brain trigger fresh secretions on the mystery gland. Thank you.